Hello and welcome to another episode of Geared Toward Geared. My name is Sean and I am so glad you're here because today we're talking about a knife that I think is frankly fantastic and I think everyone should own one. It is this knife right here, the Spyderco Byrd Rescue 2. And I'll just tell you right now, this Byrd is the word. I think it's an amazing knife. Here we have another Byrd knife. They're very similar and I'll talk a little bit about this one, but we're going to focus on the Rescue 2. I just think it's fantastic. And as you can see, we got some gloves here. We got some seat belt. Took this out of my neighbor's car. Never really liked him that much anyway. So we'll do a little demo here, and I'll show you what this thing is capable of doing and why I think it's probably the best $27 that you can spend this week. There's always a good way to spend $27. There's some great deals out there, but I think this is among the best out there. So let's get some of this stuff out of the way real quick, and I'll give you a little history of my experience with Byrd knives, which is not much, frankly. This here is a Byrd Cara Cara 2, and I bought this probably 7 or 8 years ago, and it's the only Byrd knife that I have ever purchased. It has G10 handle scales. This one has like the full stainless backspacer, stainless liners. It's pretty heavy, very grippy. It's got some reach to it, nice blade length. And as you can see, I took the pocket clip off of this knife because this lives in a chest rig that I use for my AR-15 for training in classes and things like that. It sits in a pistol pouch with just that hanging out. And the reason I chose this is that it is pretty large, it's strong, it's very sharp, very grippy, easy to operate with gloves. And if I needed to use it, which I frankly wouldn't, probably in all reality, it's enough, right? I don't need anything fancy. It's a cheap blade steel, but in a defensive scenario, it's going to get the job done because I've never seen of or heard of a knife fight that lasted so long that it dulled the blade. So I bought this specifically for that kit, just because it was inexpensive, but also pretty tough. Just a solid, very solid feeling knife. And I don't know if they make them exactly like this currently. Again, this one's probably a good 7, 8 years old, but that's my only experience with Byrd knives. And I've had this for quite a long time. So then recently I was talking with my good buddy Stuart Harvey, great friend of the channel. Many of you probably know him. And he was mentioning this knife here, which is the Byrd Rescue 2, also known as the Byrd Cara Cara Rescue 2. And if we put these things side by side, you'll notice that the profile of the handle is basically identical because they are in fact both Byrd Cara Cara 2 knives for all intents and purposes. So the overall size and shape of the handle is going to be identical. They have all the same contours. Again, this one's G10, this one is FRN. And Stuart and I were talking, and he had come across this knife, had some interest in it. He asked me if I had any experience with Byrd Cara Cara knives. I told him that I had a really good experience with this one and that I really, really liked it. He purchased a Rescue 2, said it was amazing, and I immediately went and I purchased one. And I got to tell you, I agree with Stuart. This is an amazing knife. It truly is. It's a rescue knife, of course, so it is fully serrated. But I think it's just one of the better values out there for what you're actually getting for the type of knife that this is and for what you would use it for. Now, I will say one thing before we get kind of the short version out of the way. I put a lanyard on this when I got it because I just kind of carried it around more like EDC just to kind of get used to it. And I kind of did this like 10 days of serrations challenge just to kind of get used to using serrations and just kind of trying to decide if it's something that I'm into. And so I put this lanyard on here and a bead made by my friend Jesse. But one thing I did notice a number of times when drawing this out of my pocket is the lanyard would end up like this. And when I would go to open the knife, I could not. So for the purposes of a dedicated rescue knife, I would recommend not putting a lanyard on the knife. So that lanyard's going to go. Obviously, I'm going to save that bead. So on a rescue knife like this one, in my opinion, no lanyard, because you may find yourself in a position where you cannot open it. So why do I think this is such a great deal? Well, here's the short version. We've got about a $27 knife, as I mentioned, FRN handles, and it's about a 5-inch handle. Your blade, as far as cutting edge, is about 3.5 inches, about 4 inches in total length. So our overall length here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, over 8.5 inches. So a very good sized knife. Why would you want a knife so large in a rescue knife? Maybe you have small hands. Well, one of the genius things about this design is that the way that the handle is contoured, no matter what size hand you have, this will work for you. I promise you. I put this in my wife's hand, and she naturally went to the forward finger choil, and all 4 of her fingers fit comfortably, like right in that area. For me, with a large to extra large hand, I can choke up, I can choke back. Even choke back, I have extra real estate. Stuart, who I was mentioning earlier, he also has very large hands, I think even larger than mine, and this fits him very comfortably, has a very natural thumb ramp. It's just super comfortable and super versatile, I think, in terms of its ergonomics. So it's going to work for pretty much anybody's hand size. The other really critical thing with a rescue knife such as this is the blade length. Fully serrated knives, they're all over the place. And that's great for EDC, but when we're talking about a rescue knife, you really do want some length. And I'll demonstrate this here in a minute, but you want more length than a seatbelt, for sure. You don't want a 2.5 inch knife for a rescue knife, in my opinion. Now, why would you need one? Why would you use it? How would you carry it? Where would you store it? Things like that. Well, for me, these, and I've since purchased 2 more. So I have this orange one, and then I have 2 that are black. You can find them on eBay, Amazon, probably your favorite online retailer, for about the $27 mark. And to me, this is a knife that can be used as an EDC knife if you're into fully serrated knives. It's obviously going to have certain limitations, but really I see this as a dedicated rescue tool to be stored either in a bug out bag, an EDC bag. For me, one of them lives in my vehicle, one of them lives in a trauma kit, and the other one lives in another vehicle. Now, I think the next question that kind of comes to mind is, well, if you're going to have a rescue tool such as this to either extricate yourself from a vehicle or kind of render aid to somebody else, wouldn't you prefer to have something that's kind of all in one, like a window punch, strap cutter combination type thing? And there's certainly nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, in one of the compartments of my vehicle, I carry this, and this is a one of those same Manhattan Portage coin purses that we've seen before, and attached to it is a rescue me tool. And we will compare and see how this cuts seatbelt compared to the Byrd Rescue 2. So there's nothing wrong with that. However, it is going to suffer in a few ways. And so for me, this is a dedicated window punch, and this is a dedicated strap cutter. So that's just kind of the way I look at it. In addition, I think this makes for a great kind of on-duty carry. If you work in EMS, fire, law enforcement, security, anything like that, I think this would make an ideal rescue knife to carry because it's inexpensive. The chances you'll have to use this to cut somebody out of a seatbelt are slim to none. I worked as an active duty paramedic for a number of years, and I think I personally cut maybe 2 seatbelts, and I used trauma shears to do it. Most of the time, the seatbelts were either they weren't wearing a seatbelt, or the seatbelt could just be manually unbuckled. If it was truly stuck and needed to be cut, and most often the fire department had already done it by the time we arrived. So in a professional setting, you don't need, in my opinion, a $200 brand name rescue tool. I just don't think you do. I think a $27 Byrd Rescue 2 is more than enough for a duty level rescue tool. As a matter of fact, I believe and I could be mistaken, but when I was talking to Stuart, I'm almost certain that these are actually issued to the Port Authority Police in New York City as a standard issue tool for them. So what are some of the features and what do I like about this? One, it's super lightweight compared to the G10 version with full scales. It weighs significantly less, and I wish I had my scale with me, but I don't. So I will annotate the weight of this knife right now. So there's the weight. So it's very lightweight. The other thing that I really like that they did that was very smart, and I usually do not like Spyderco's pocket clips. They do carry well in terms of retention, but the placement on this one for me is actually pretty genius because you're going to have that much sticking out of your pocket, which is a lot. And that's what you want if you're carrying this in a pocket or like clipped to some MOLLE webbing in a bag. You do not want a super deep ride, disappear in your pocket type carry for a knife that could potentially be used to extricate somebody from a burning vehicle, for example. So I think the placement of the clip is very, very smart, and I really like that. Again, I would personally recommend not running a lanyard, but that's up to you. The other thing I like is that it's FRN. It's linerless, so it's super lightweight. But if you notice, and I'll bring in the other Byrd Cara Cara 2, the blade stock does not taper. You see that? So on the standard Cara Cara 2, which is just kind of a larger EDC blade, the blade tapers, it gets narrower towards the tip. On the Rescue 2, your blade stock remains the same the entire length of the blade. There is no taper whatsoever. What appears to be a taper is actually just the grind itself. So you have full stock thickness the entire way, so there is actually a lot more strength in this, plastic handled knife than you would think. Another thing I love, and I'm going to throw on one of my gloves here, is that the size lends itself to use with gloves. So one-handed opening and closing with this knife is so easy with gloves, it's not even funny. So again, if you're in a duty scenario, or if you're just a bystander and you're trying to help somebody out of a vehicle, maybe there's broken glass, maybe there's a fire, and you have some gloves, and you try to deploy this knife, it is so easy. Like that deployment hole just sticks to the glove, and it makes it so easy to deploy, and I love that. So very easy one-handed access and deployment with a gloved hand. So that's another huge win for the Byrd Rescue 2. So how does it cut? That's, I think, an important thing. So let's first, I don't have a ton of this, so I want to be kind of careful how I use it. Let's first test the Rescue Me tool, and we'll see how this cuts. So we'll just kind of fold it over, and I'm going to run it in this direction, and we'll see how it cuts. Not bad. It cuts pretty well. Let's do that one more time. Not bad. Takes, and I've done this before a number of times with this tool. It takes a little bit of practice in that you have to really pull the material in this direction so that you can get a good clean cut. I've seen some people fumble with these, but they generally work pretty well. So nothing bad to say about the Rescue Me. I think it is a good tool. But for me, it's more of a dedicated window punch / backup strap cutter. And with any of this stuff, a very important thing to take note of before I start cutting some more seatbelt is wherever you choose to store this is a pretty critical aspect of the tool itself. And what I mean by that is if you're going to use any tool, whether it's the Rescue 2 or Rescue Me or any type of rescue device in a vehicle specifically, it needs to be stored in such a manner that if you roll your vehicle over, you can still access that tool. I've seen so many car accidents in my time as a paramedic, dozens of rollovers, multiple rollovers, cars where we've arrived and they've already been upside down, vehicle fires, and there is crap everywhere. Debris on the road, stuff all over the vehicle. Everything inside the car becomes a projectile. So this, for example, I have this attached to this bag to give me kind of a little more something to grab hold of. And this is in a compartment that is very secure in my vehicle that I can reach from the driver's seat and from the passenger seat. Glove boxes sometimes will stay closed. Oftentimes they will. Center consoles, in my experience, almost always end up open if the car rolls over. So a center console may not be the best option for storage. That's my opinion based on my experience, so take that for what it's worth. So let's see how this guy actually cuts, because that is really what matters. So we'll do a few cuts here with the Rescue 2. So there's the cut. I mean, that is a clean, like a laser clean cut, nice and straight. And it takes very little effort, of course. Let's do another cut here. I mean, the amount of effort this takes is almost minimal. I would say somebody as young as probably, I don't know, 4 years old could do this. It's just, it really takes so little effort with those serrations to make a nice clean cut. So the performance on this thing, and I've done this dozens of times, I mean dozens of times with this knife. And so here's what I would do personally. I would carry this and hope I never have to use it. If I carried this professionally, if I used it like 3 or 4 times, I would just buy a new one every year. It's $27, right? That way you know it's always pretty sharp. But again, I've probably cut 30 times at least through seatbelt and a bunch of nylon cordage, and it's still super, super sharp. So I really like that. And what makes this a rescue tool, if you're not familiar, is just that blunt tip. So if the seatbelt is over, you know, across somebody's body, we'll use my arm as an example, you can use that blunt tip, right? You put the blunt tip against their skin and you can slide under the material that you need to cut, right? So that's why you see that blunt sheep's foot shape on a rescue tool, generally speaking. So I just think this is a really, really good one. It's well constructed. It's comfortable, it's strong. Even though there's no liners, you do have a strong back lock, and there is steel inside of the liners that is part of that lock. There's no blade play. It's super grippy, plenty of reach. I can't say a bad thing about this. And again, I don't need super steel on a rescue knife. If you're going to use this as an EDC knife, you know, more power to you, and maybe you want a little better steel on a fully serrated blade. But as a dedicated rescue tool, I think this is fantastic. And I think at $27, you should own at least one of these. I have 3, and I just think they're great. So that is the Byrd Rescue 2. Highly, highly recommended. And again, if you are going to store this, I would recommend putting it in a bag, like a trauma kit or an EDC bag, carrying it on your person, or putting it somewhere that's very secure. Some people have those visor organizers that are very secure with a lot of hook and loop Velcro. You know, so there's a number of ways you can do it. Just make sure that anything that you're going to be using to potentially extricate yourself from a vehicle in an emergency is stored in such a manner that if you happen to roll over, it does not become a projectile and end up in the back seat where it is then of no use to you. So that is it. That is the Byrd Rescue 2. I think it's phenomenal. And yeah, that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching. And I really, this is for me, for this year, 2019, I bought a lot of knives, and I'll do a video probably in November of kind of like my top 10 of the year of knives that I purchased during the year. And this might make that list. To me, it's that good. I truly mean that. So if you're looking for a rescue tool to add to a kit, to a trauma kit, to your EDC rotation, whatever, I think you should take a long, hard look at the Byrd Rescue 2. That's all I got for you. Thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. As always, these videos that have a little bit of kind of the medical emergency kind of thing behind them tend to go a little longer, so I do apologize for that. But if you did stick with me, I really do appreciate it. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you soon.